The yield to maturity that we've just calculated on a bond has three main components. The first is some sort of pure time value of money. If I'm giving up my money, if I'm deferring consumption, how much more do I need later on to compensate me for that? The second is going to be a premium for credit risk, also known as default risk. And the third is going to be a premium for liquidity risk. And note that for more exotic bonds, the YTM can account for other things like embedded options. Some bonds are callable or convertible. That's not something we have to worry about too much in this particular class. So treasury bonds, the most recently issued treasury bond of any maturity is referred to the on-the-run bonds. And these are the most liquid bonds in the world. And that accounts for the majority of that trading volume that we saw before. So the market considers these to have no default risk. In addition, they have no liquidity premium. And so we know that yield to maturity contains time value, liquidity premium, and credit premium. Since on-the-run treasury bonds have neither of those, all that's left is the pure time value of money. And so it's very common to essentially put these values in a chart, and a chart of these yields to maturity for each maturity is referred to as the yield curve. Now there can be other yield curves for AAA or for other investment grades, but when people refer to the yield curve and they don't actually qualify it, what they are referring to is a chart depicting the yields to maturities for the most recently issued treasury bond of each maturity, the on-the-run treasuries, and this depicts the pure time value of money. So let me go to a spreadsheet where I have graphed these, and then we can talk about the shape of the yield curve and why we might observe that shape. First, let me show you where I pulled the data. I'm going to Google treasury rates. Click enter. My first hit is this daily treasury yield curve rates, and this is where I'm pulling the data from. And so you can see that we have the yield to maturity on 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, 6 month, all of the different maturities of treasuries, and here are the yields to maturity. Note that I would have to divide these by 100 if I'm going to do any calculations with them. So it's telling me that the 1-year rate is 0.12, that's 0.12%. The 30-year rate is 1.4, that's 1.4%. So again, if I'm going to do any calculations, this is the current month. If I wanted to go back 10 years to 2010, I would click OK. And it's going to give me the yields to maturity for 2010, and I can go back down here and find out what the yields to maturity were 10 years ago. So that's the data we're going to use. So here's the data that I've pulled for all the different maturities, and this was as of September 2020, 19, 18, so 2 years ago. Here's 5 years ago, and here's 10 years ago, and here I have put them in a chart. And so let's just take a look at some of these values. So the most recent one is red, that's 924, and you can see this is fairly flat through 3 years, and then it's upward sloping. Here you can see a year ago I had this orange line with this sort of downward sloping dip in the middle, and we'll talk about what that means. Here is 2 years ago, the yellow line, and then the green line is from 5 years ago, and the blue line is from 10 years ago. One quick thing, note that on this chart, the difference between 6 month, well, the difference between 1 month and 2 month, 2 month and 3 month is exactly the same sort of horizontal distance as the difference between 2 years and 3 years, 3 years and 5 years, 7 and 10, 10 and 20. And so this is common to see it this way, but just to do it, I've scaled it so that the time periods are correctly scaled. And so you can see that here, the difference between 0 years and 5 years is the same as the difference between 25 and 30 years. And so just sort of going back between the two charts, you can see, for example, if you look at the blue line, you can see the blue line is very flat and then comes way up. But here, when I scale it, you can see there isn't much of a flat section. It just pumps straight up. I'm not sure what's best. Just know what you're looking at. When you're looking at a yield curve chart, know whether or not it's correctly scaled or whether it's categorized so that you can interpret the data correctly.